There are some pretty large problems buying high mileage Subaru WRXs, and in today's video, we're going to talk about everything you need to know about buying a 2015 plus FA20 Subaru WRX, specifically the VA generation. And now that we have high mileage iterations of these cars, I'm going to talk about what you need to look out for and what the biggest problem is when you're buying these cars, because now you can pick them up for as cheap as like $10,000 to $14,000 with like 100 to 130,000 miles on them, potentially even cheaper with 150K plus thousand miles on them. And we're gonna go over the biggest problem. And I'm making this video now that I've basically made the decision to bring on a VB, a 2022 WRX on the channel, because initially I was gonna buy one of these higher mileage WRXs, but we've had enough support, and with the last video, we've made basically a decision in the community that the VB is the best car for the channel. So I'm making this video because this is the process that I've been going through for the last year trying to bring on a car on this channel. If you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more Subaru content, we're about to start one of the biggest builds on this channel with a 2022 WRX. It will be coming in the next 1 to 2 months is my best guess. You're going to start seeing content at least then about that car, and it will be absolutely, it's going to be a thrilling ride. We're going to do lots to that car. I'm going to walk you through the entire process of completely modifying it, talk about all the problems, everything you need to know basically about that car. Let's say you're looking for a 2015 plus WRX that isn't the VB generation because you want to bargain, you want to get into the WRX platform, and you want to go and have fast, fun, enjoyable experiences with your car, with your Subaru, and really understand the platform. Now, there is a downside. There's a reason why these cars are cheaper. It's not just because they're older, it's because they could carry a handful of really big problems. And these are problems that I was facing myself when I was thinking about buying these higher mileage cars. And there were three very critical aspects of looking at higher mileage WRXs that were kind of pillars on why I didn't end up buying certain cars that I went out and looked at. I've looked at over 50 plus WRXs in the last 6 months trying to bring one onto this channel. And in all of that, I haven't really pulled the trigger on one because I pretty much got a good idea that most of the cars I was looking at had these problems. And just seeing those Facebook posts get marked as sold, people obviously picked up those cars. So let's go over those things. So the three main pillars of what we're going to be talking about is, first and foremost, the direct injection system. The FA20 motor is a direct injection system. We're going to talk about the downsides of higher mileage with the direct injection system. Number two is going to be with the transmission, and number three is going to be with the history of the car. So number one, this is just by mileage and what you're putting in your car. Because the FA20 on these 2015 to 2021 WRXs are direct injection, it means the fuel is being sprayed directly into the engine cycle, into the combustion cycle. It's not going through what we would call a pump system or injectors and all those extra parts. What does this really mean? The fuel path doesn't hit as many surfaces as it gets to the car. This is wildly beneficial in the overall engine itself and does great things when you don't have lots and lots of miles and you don't have less than perfect gas usage. But the reality is what happens is if you have bad gas and even good gas with a small particulate load, over time, those particulates, that carbon, makes it into your engine. Your engine will actually burn that carbon deposit, carbon just being whatever is in the gasoline that is an impurity, into your engine itself. Now, this is why we see these cars needing walnut blasting and tuners wanting that every 30 to 40,000 miles after 40,000 miles on the dash. And that's literally it. Now, the downside though is that cleaning can only do so many of the surfaces in the car, and at some point you're gonna see buildups over time that hit areas that are harder to reach or impossible to reach, and you might in the long term have problems. Now, from a daily driving perspective, you're probably not going to see those problems. You might see a slight reduction in fuel economy, little things like that, but you're probably never going to have a catastrophic event. But what might happen is if you're tuning that vehicle, let's say you're tuning a car with 150,000 miles on it, and it's got a little piece of carbon buildup that's got carbon building on the carbon that's building on the carbon, and it gets larger and larger and larger, you might actually have either that carbon fractures off and enters the engine cycle and does something to the mechanical device of the engine, or etc. Lots of things could happen when you've got a foreign object in a closed system. So that is a concern. I didn't particularly necessarily see a lot of cars, but one of the questions that I was asking all the owners is just like, what kind of fuel have you been putting in? And that kind of question. And for the most part, that is something to think about. It's not necessarily something to write a car off of. That wasn't a decision making, but that is like one of the core like mechanic problems that are uncontrollable, let's say. Like it doesn't depend on user error or anything like that. that is just something with these cars, as they age, you're going to face more and more. Now, the second two things are kind of a combined thing just in general, and they both come from the user standpoint of owning these cars. It's not just an age and mileage thing. It's the combination of transmission health in general, and we're not just talking clutch and stuff here. We're talking about the overall health of the transmission. We'll get into it in a second. And the history of tuning the vehicle and not being able to verify and tuning the vehicle. So what I've been looking for myself, looking at high mileage WRXs, I've been looking for single or maybe dual owner WRXs where the owner has a little bit of prior information about the first owner. Those are unicorns. They're hard to find, right? This is an entry-level sports car for a lot of people. Maybe it's the second step, but the reality is they pass through a lot of hands, right? 140,000 miles with a 2015. That car has hit bodies. That is just a reality. It's very uncommon to find someone that's kept one from 2015 until now and put 130,000 miles on it. So you might ask yourself, why is it a negative to have someone that has had unknown tuning or done tuning to their car unknown? Well, a couple things could have happened. Very rarely do we find people that truly understand the tuning side of this, or they try to cut corners, or they work with a tuner that's trying to push some limits, right? It's not uncommon for people to get into a sports car, beat the living crap out of it, push it for every wheel horsepower that they can get, and then they sell it when they think they've hit the threshold of what's safe and pass that risk on to the next person. So what kind of things can that damage? It can damage the overall engine health by damaging small appurtenances on the engine and just put excess wear and tear on things that you might have to fix. So from an engine failure standpoint, typically what you're looking for here is overall engine health, knock, rod bearing, compression testing. That's all you can basically do. But specifically with the F820, where that gets a little bit more nuanced, is that third item with the transmission. So we know a weak point of these transmissions is running a 300 pound-feet of torque number. You can run more horsepower, but that's pretty much the limit for the transmission. Now, it's not just going to damage the clutch and the flywheel, it's going to damage internal components of how the transmission is built, whether it's the synchros or anything that could have been a reciprocating piece of what the pressure on the clutch and the flywheel are. You know, when we think about it, the clutches engages with teeth, right? If you're hitting those teeth harder and harder beyond the tolerances that it was designed for, you're putting torques and forces like moments around certain aspects and parts of the internal transmission that you just can't replicate. Now, this might not sound like the end of the world, but the reality is a clutch replacement or a flywheel replacement isn't going to help you if you've got bigger and worse problems that can't really be fixed. It's easier just to put a new casing and full transmission into the car. So are either of these things negatives? No, but as these cars get older and you're buying a higher mileage WRX, like any other car in the market, you're going to have bigger risks to larger aspects of the cars. It just happens to be that people tend to beat the living crap out of the WRX platform, so you're going to see it with larger system components and potentially more frequently. So those are the problems with buying a high mileage WRX. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? Absolutely not. You should just be aware of what you're getting into and doing your due diligence. And at some point, you just don't know. I've been hyper aware when I've been looking at my search because my plan is to fully build it. And I'm willing to sit and wait for that unicorn where I find someone that's, you know, I've been lucky enough that they haven't done anything to their car. Like my 2016 Subaru WRX that you saw on the channel, that was never tuned, never modified, not even the tiniest modification. It was strictly driven as a business car for someone that was doing photography as a business for, you know, on racetracks as a consultant. Regardless, he was driving to and from on the highway. It was super unmolested. That car gave me absolutely no problems, and I firmly believe part of that car not giving me problems was in the first like 30,000 miles of its life, it wasn't tuned, beat on, forced under undue stress. Because guys, you have to remember, tuning these vehicles, there's a little bit that you get until the safety factor, which is probably considered within the bounds of what these engines are designed to work with. But beyond that, what most of us run on these cars, they are considered safe. They are by no means safe in the long run for these cars. You're pushing more than the car is designed for, so you're gonna have premature failure of certain parts. They're just, that's a reality. And that is something that I think as a community that we've lost on the higher mileage stuff, and that maybe a lot of people don't understand that when people say tunes are safe, they're thinking 10, 15, 20,000 miles of not track use, maybe 30,000 miles, and somebody that might be willing to do a little bit more in, you know, a little bit more, let's say, intrusive maintenance over the long term with parts that you wouldn't necessarily have to like replace. So those are the things that you need to look out for. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next video, and do get excited for the 2022 coming to the channel. It doesn't mean I'm done with the VA generation. My intention here is that I'll have both generations because I truly love the VA generation. Like, that is a car that I've realized I have a passion behind beyond what is logical, which is nice, honestly, and I want to build one fully. It's really going to depend on the channel growing, so things that can help that are, you know, free for you to do. Like the video, comment below, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me grow the community, and most importantly, it helps me build content for you guys and have more access to vehicles so I can make more content for you. So please consider subscribing, please consider doing that, and I will either say hello and say hi in the comment section below, or I'll see you in the next video.